Edward Nelson, Judge, presides.
Please be seated. Good morning. We're on the record in case number 12 CF 1083A, State versus George Zimmerman. Everybody is here in place. All of the jurors are now ready, so we're going to begin with bringing in juror B7. Counsel, the originals of the responses will be up here in case you need to refer to them.
B7 is present, Your Honor.
Good morning. Please be seated. Sir, the attorneys are going to be referring to you by your juror number, B7, and they're going to start with asking questions. And first will be Mr. Delorando. Yes.
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
As Judge Nelson indicated, we're going to be asking you questions by virtue of your name. In terms of B7 will be your name today. Okay. You filled out the questionnaire, and I had some questions back as a result of that. From what I understand, you got some information from this case from NPR and the Orlando Sentinel and then local TV news. Do I have that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you recall what particular program on NPR? Was it the morning or?
It would have most likely have been the BBC News, the overnight.
Okay. And you recall what you heard about the case?
I think I've heard just references to it over the past year.
Okay.
If you have anything specific to ask,
I'm trying to
I understand.
probe your mind in terms of what you remember. And let's start at the very beginning. Your news information on this case would have been limited to those three sources, from what I understand, NPR, Orlando Sentinel, and the local TV news?
Those are the news sources that I consume my news from. I have seen references, links, other stuff to sources that I don't follow.
Sure. Did you do any internet surfing at all in terms of, either on, Facebook, other kind of stuff at all?
In terms of this case?
Yes, sir.
No.
Okay, so I guess local news would have been the actual TV stations here locally?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you recall what particular TV station? Is there one you favor more than the others?
13, my favorite. And then maybe any local news, maybe during a television show they'll do during the commercials coming up
Like
at
a
11
break
o'clock.
Okay. And are you a regular TV watcher in terms of the news, like at 6 or 6:30, or it's just infrequently?
It's very infrequent.
Okay. Now, the NPR, BBC, do you do that every day, or is just
My car radio is tuned to NPR, yes.
Okay. So would that be in the morning going to work, and then in the afternoon or evening coming back from work?
Yes, in the morning when I typically go to work, it's the Diana Rehm show.
Okay.
I cannot recall a specific instance of them discussing this case, but it may have happened in the last year.
And then you mentioned also that you've seen references on the internet, but you didn't read many of them?
No. Most of them were links to blogs and stuff that I find very good news sources.
If I were to ask you now what you recall about the case, what comes to mind?
There's a shooting.
Okay.
There's a fight that led to a shooting.
Okay. Anything else that comes to mind?
I know George Zimmerman was involved and Trayvon Martin died.
Okay.
I know Trayvon Martin was visiting relatives. And I know that there was they were talking early in the case about the stand your ground law.
Okay.
And stuff of that nature.
Right. Anything else that comes to mind?
It seems like, well, I don't know if, like, personally or just the facts, but it seems like my opinion of it seems like a lot of people have taken sides on it.
That a lot of people have taken sides on it.
And find that inappropriate.
I'm sorry, you have a neutral view?
Yeah, well, I feel it's inappropriate for a situation like this to make it something that takes sides with.
So if I understand you correctly, from what you've seen on TV or in the internet kind of stuff, or listened to radio programs, you have made it, you have taken a position that on purpose you did not want to take a view. You thought it was inappropriate to take a position.
I didn't think it was inappropriate that I would take a position because I did not expect I would ever end up on a jury, obviously. But I definitely felt that I didn't like the way the news covered it. And
what about the news coverage did you not like?
it felt very speculative. I feel like not all the facts are there.
Okay. And did you feel it was speculative one way or the other? In other words, in favor of the defendant, Mr. Zimmerman, or in favor of the victim, Mr.
I felt it was both ways.
Okay, so you thought the coverage was biased one way and then also biased the other way.
And that's what I meant earlier when I said people were taking sides.
Okay. And you didn't approve of that, I gather.
No, I didn't. I felt it should be up to the jury.
Okay. So, in other words, you believe in the American system that what a trial is, what this is all about in terms of determination of guilt or innocence is here in the courtroom.
Absolutely, you should not be convicted in a court of public opinion.
Okay, all right. And so, in your watching of TV, or did you focus, or let me restate that. Did you listen to any of the news conferences in terms of commentators making comments about the case?
No.
Okay. What I'm trying to find out from you, sir, is your knowledge of the case. Was it purely news? In other words, Channel 13 reporters saying, today this happened, versus people after the fact commenting, either attorneys involved in the case or attorneys or other commentators saying this is what happened or this is what didn't happen?
The other commentators is what I set out to avoid.
Okay, so you on purpose avoided anybody commenting about the
Yeah,
case?
I did that with any news, like any sort of news, especially local news. If it happened on the other side of the world, but this is in my backyard.
And your knowledge of the case, was it also at the very beginning when it happened back in February of 2012? And have you kept up with it just because you live in this community?
I just kind of forgot about it until I heard on NPR the trial started the day of my jury duty.
Okay, so that kind of...
And I was like, oh.
How about when you got the summons, I think maybe 3 weeks ago or a month ago, did that say, hey, maybe I'll be on the jury?
No, I actually got the summons back in March.
Okay. Wow.
I was very busy at work, so I asked for a postponement. And then I did get, but I did not know that. I assumed that the jury had already been selected at this point, if it was going on.
So you originally had been summoned to potential trials in March, and then you got it postponed, and then you ended up, this is the fallback position, I guess.
Yeah.
I got you. Have you kept up with the court proceedings in terms of what happened in court in front of Judge Nelson?
No.
And I gather from your questionnaire, when you listen to whatever facts you listen to, you did not on purpose form an opinion?
No, I didn't hear enough. It felt like there were too many unanswered questions. I would have to read the police report, which you don't get in the media. You get quotes or like little parts of it.
So even on the limited knowledge that you obtained from the news, you on purpose did not form an opinion?
I don't know. On purpose it was.
You just did not? You didn't have enough information?
Yeah.
Okay. Were you leaning one way or the other or not?
No.
Okay. So in other words, you come with a blank slate right now?
Yeah, I would say that, yes. More, yeah.
Did you talk to anybody? Forget about the news right now. Have you talked to people in the community or family and say, hey, this is what this case is about, and then they gave you their 2 cents worth?
Absolutely.
Have you done that? I mean,
Absolutely.
I'm assuming it's a normal thing to do.
Yeah, it comes up in conversation amongst family and colleagues and friends.
Let's see if we could divide them up in terms of just family.
Okay.
Who in your family have you talked about, and what have they told you about the case?
My father.
Okay.
My father seems very interested in the case.
I'm sorry.
My father appears very interested in the case.
He's like into it.
Well, he's retired. He's spends a lot of his time watching the news.
I got it. So he's got a lot of time to do. What did he tell you about the case?
He told me, I think that's kind of what I know about the case. He is, like me, he hasn't taken sides. I think, if anything, he feels that, inappropriate things were done by Mr. Zimmerman, and unfortunately, someone died. And he doesn't feel that there's any real malice, but he feels that there was a fight. And from the way I interpreted it is that Mr. Zimmerman was losing the fight and pulled the gun.
Did that in any way sway your feelings about the case? What your dad told you?
I certainly respect what my father tells me. It didn't sway me. I wasn't at one point where now that you bring that up.
Okay. Who else have you talked to? You don't have to name everybody.
Yeah.
Just kind of get a flavor for who you've talked to.
I talk at, we chat at work, certainly,
Sure.
but mostly what we talk about is sports and video games.
There's another world out there besides this case.
Yes, so this case has rarely come up. I know at one point someone was talking about the case, and I remember saying, it's ridiculous, just let the jury decide.
Do you remember what that person, I'm assuming that person was at work, do you remember what this person said?
No.
And there have been people that have been vocal one way and the other. Was this person vocal in Zimmerman's favor? Versus...
I think it may have been about three of us, and I think maybe one person was on one side, the other person was on the other side. But all of us were kind of well, we don't really know. There's not a lot in there. It's not a lot.
And I gather when this discussion was had among the two different people and yourself, would you say you were in the middle?
Yeah.
In terms of opinions, or
yeah, I compared to them, I didn't have an opinion. I was it's tragic.
okay.
I'd like to know more.
Now, as you read in the questionnaire, and more importantly, what the judge is going to tell you, under the law, people bring in whatever they've absorbed from the media, etc., and they bring in opinions. And the law requires you to be able to set that aside and make a decision only on what happens in this courtroom. Do you feel at this time that you would be able to do that?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. How about if you're sitting in a chair, in the jury, and you listen to the evidence, and you listen to whatever come out as evidence, and you go, hold on. But on BBC they said it comes to mind, which is a normal thing. Can you agree that you would have to set that aside, whatever the commentator or commentator said?
Absolutely.
You think you could do that?
Absolutely.
And I think you mentioned that you kind of just saw references on the internet. Did you, at any time when you were going on the internet, did you go on any websites in particular?
Facebook.
Okay.
I go to fark.com as a news aggregator.
Sure. Okay.
That's kind of where
it's got a variety.
It does. So that way I'm not relying. I don't get all my news from one source, but really when I'm first place I go for news is something like ESPN.
Okay. So you have not got to any particular websites dedicated to this case, either pro the state or pro the victim or pro the defendant? Or
I would see links to those, and if you're familiar with fark.com,
yes,
the link kind of gives you an idea of what you would be getting into.
And so you on purpose avoided those?
I was like, I'm not going to waste my time with that.
Okay. I have another, Your Honor. Thank you very much, sir.
Mr. O'Hara?
Yes, thank you. Morning, sir. How are you? It may have just become clear to you, but what we're focusing on today is what you may have heard about the case in the past. Maybe other times we'll talk to you more about other issues, but I just want to focus on what we call pretrial publicity.
Okay.
Mr. DeLorean asked you about newspapers and internet and TV stations. I want to spend some time on that, okay? You had said that your go-to station on TV is 13?
It's the station that when I turn on my TV, that's what it automatically defaults.
Another Bright House customer?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's the default.
So if you then would watch the news, would you generally watch it on 13?
Yes.
13 has in the past covered some of these proceedings. They would have a camera in the courtroom looking at what we're doing here. Did you watch any of those or notice them?
I don't recall ever seeing that on the news.
Okay.
I've seen no courtroom video of this particular case on television.
You see no courtroom video?
I've seen none.
Okay. And your go-to station on the radio then is NPR?
Yes.
Why?
Well, I like talk radio.
Okay.
Sports radio is kind of silly. And the other news stations play very political type radio, which I'm not interested in. I want to hear the news and the stories of the day.
And NPR does it more on a national and sometimes international basis?
Yes.
Is that more of a focus of yours than the local?
NPR also has local shows too. Sometimes on my drive home, I think once a week, they have a show where they talk about the history of Florida.
You talk about, I'm sorry,
The
what?
history of the state of Florida.
Tell me a bit more about the news program that you listen to in the morning.
So generally, it's in the morning. It's the Diane and Maureen show. It's a sort of a panel show. They take a topic of the day from all over the world, and they may very well have one point done a show on this case. And she'll have someone from the left, someone from the right, someone from a university or a newspaper, and they kind of go around and have they just talk about the issue.
And were there any times at all that you recall that show spoke about this case?
Yeah, as I said earlier, I don't remember if it has. I don't remember hearing one, but it's probably likely. I don't always go to work at the same time every day, so sometimes I miss the show entirely. And I have a 10-minute commute to work anyway. So.
Okay. Don't catch much of it.
I don't catch much of it.
You did mention that what was the first time that you heard anything at all about this case?
Yeah, I guess it must have been really big news when it happened. It must have been on the front page of the Sentinel.
Okay.
Of the Sentinel's website. I don't have a subscription.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. I thought you said sometimes you get your news from the Sentinel.
It's from the Orlando Sentinel's website.
The website?
Yeah.
And is that something that you do as a habit?
I used to, but they put up a paywall, so now if you spend enough time on it every month, they start trying to make you pay money. And so then I just close and I go to ESPN or something, or go back to work maybe.
Give you a tease of the information and once
Yeah,
you
you can go to the front page, click on an article, and maybe you can get through about 3 sentences before they kick you back out to the front page with a banner saying subscribe to the website.
Okay. How long ago did you stop doing? How long ago did they require that? And
Seems
you
like
stopped?
about a year ago, maybe. Yeah, it's been a while since I've really gone to that website, so I haven't really gotten local news from the internet much.
This case has been active. The event occurred in February of 2012, so it's been active a little less than 16 months or thereabouts. So do you remember looking at the Orlando Sentinel website during the first few months of 2012, where you would have had an opportunity to read more of it than lately?
I'm sure I did read the initial articles about
Okay.
it.
Would you then have, in addition, read the articles specific to this case?
I would think so. Yeah, that was just right when it was happening, and there was a lot of questions out there, not a lot of facts.
Tell me what stands out the most to you of what you knew about the case early on.
It seemed to me that it was a lot of discussion about the stand your ground law.
Okay. Tell me what you remember from the conversation wrapped around that law.
As it relates to this case?
Well, let's just tell me what it is that you remember hearing or what you remember.
I remember when the law was being proposed
Okay.
and debated, and I don't remember if it was enacted by referendum or by the legislature. I certainly remember the controversy over the law being put on the books. I don't remember how long ago that was. Was it that long ago?
Presuming for these quick questions that it was several years before this event,
Right,
as far
it
back
was.
as 2005.
Yeah, that sounds right.
I don't want to talk specifically about your views on that during this time. We may have another opportunity to do that. What I am focused on is to the extent that you've read something in the news, even before February, this event that is now in your mind about the Stand Your Ground law. I would like you to talk to me about that. So what do you remember about what you heard about the Stand Your Ground law?
Well, when we're talking about my memories, it's hard for me to differentiate what I remember reading and what I know about it.
It's okay, just tell me what are your thoughts about, particularly what you remember seeing and hearing, thoughts about that law.
Well, I thought this seemed like, I guess, the debate over the law was it a necessary law? Is self-defense already covered in Florida law? Is it necessary for us to take the law further?
Okay. That's fine. That's fine. The one question we could ask every juror and then stop is whether or not you can be fair, impartial, put aside what you have outside the courtroom and just listen here. I'm going to modify that just a touch to ask you whatever you think Stand Your Ground is, and for that matter, whatever you think self-defense is. If you were to listen to the facts of the case, the judge is going to instruct you. She's going to actually read what we call jury instructions, telling you what the elements are and what the defense elements are. My concern is that whatever you brought to you here today, as intense or partial as that might be, if you were told that you had to follow the law, apply the facts of the law, would you be able to do that rather than use what you remember your understanding of the Stand Your Ground law to be?
I believe I can. I have served on a jury before.
Okay.
And that is exactly what happened.
And you probably went through a process similar to this.
It wasn't quite as...
Yeah, I guess not.
But yes, I do remember the proceedings. The laws were clearly explained to us. And we took the evidence, we compared it to the law. Was the law broken? And that's how our verdict was.
And you understood what the judge advised you had to do to come back with a lawful verdict in that case?
Yes.
You were able to accomplish, not the verdict itself, but you were able to listen to the judge, understand why he or she told you to do what you did, that you did it?
Yes.
Great. When you said also that your initial knowledge of the case was that a lot of people have taken sides,
Right.
tell me what you mean by that.
There seems to be a lot of people that feel Mr. Zimmerman shot Mr. Martin, or followed him, attacked him based on his race. And then on the other side, there's a lot of people that think, it seems to have the opinion that Mr. Martin was some sort of thug that was looking for a fight. And I'm kind of like, well, how do you know these things unless you know these people?
Do you follow one side or the other of that
No.
argument or positioning?
No, I haven't heard enough of the case. I find it, kind of offensive that people would, especially, would say something like that about a dead man or someone who's been through what Mr. Zimmerman has.
Do you think it's appropriate that we're questioning you and telling you that you shouldn't use media influence in a courtroom?
I think it's extremely important.
Okay. If you did sit on the jury and another juror said to you, well, I didn't hear about this part. They never said this, but I'm telling you, I remember this happened.
Right.
What would you do?
I would certainly point out the judge's directions. I believe, from what I remember, covered that. The jury is only allowed to consider what's presented in the courtroom as evidence in the trial.
I may have asked you this. Tell me if I did. I apologize, because I think I did now that I'm about to ask it again. Was there any one thing about this case that just stuck out in your mind as being the most significant point about the case from everything you've heard about it before you walked in here today?
Actually, you didn't ask me that question because I haven't understood why this case has gained such national attention.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like this is something that probably happens rather often.
Okay. And if I then asked you, all told, and I'm not going to ask you the particular events, but all told, how many inputs have you had about this case? How many times have you talked to, or heard from the media, and how many times have you heard from other people about the George Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin event?
That's a tough question.
Mm-hmm.
You said it was in 16 months. I would put it in the range of 40 to 60 references.
Okay. So maybe a few times a month. Is that where you're getting that guesstimate from?
Yeah.
Okay. And it sounds like some of that was from the media, not much. Some was also work, and some was also your dad.
Yeah, I would say mostly it's from the media. It's definitely not something that's come up in conversation very much.
Okay. I want to talk to you about your conversations with your dad just a little bit more. And one thing that caught my attention was you said you respect your dad, and you're going to respect his opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So did he have, I asked you a question yourself, if you had to put yourself on one side or another of that positioning, George Zimmerman did this for a reason, Trayvon Martin was this type of person, whatever that might be.
Right.
What side do you think your dad would fall on?
I believe I answer this to the other guy. I feel like his opinion is that there was a fight that could have been avoided, that Mr. Zimmerman instigated, but he doesn't feel that alone makes him guilty of murder.
Let's fast forward for a moment and say that you're sitting on the jury and you hear evidence that conflicts with your father's thoughts about the case.
Right.
One, what do you do about that?
Well, I would take the evidence over my father's opinion.
Okay. Two, you okay with going back home and telling him that? If he says something like, hey, I thought I told you that this thing didn't have to happen, or whatever he tells
I
you.
assume you're talking about after the trial is over. Unless I was instructed that I couldn't, I would tell him, well, this is what we were showing in the court.
Right. But you would be okay with, because my dad was never wrong until I was 17, then was wrong for 10 years, and he was never wrong again.
I did.
Presuming that's similar with your dad, somewhere around there?
Well, until the part where he was never wrong again.
Oh, so you're still working through that. I worked through that at about 27, so you maybe...
My father, he's a very moderate guy. He really does He doesn't have like one position on everything.
But you would be okay with, in effect, disagreeing with him, not even disagreeing with him, but just deciding a case based upon the facts here and not on what he thinks was the way to do it, or what he thought before he heard everything.
I take his advice, but that doesn't mean I always follow it.
Okay. You also mentioned that you spent some time on Facebook. Any conversations or back and forth on Facebook specific to this case?
No, I just scrolling through and I see links from someone I might work with, or someone I knew in high school or something that says, there's an article and whatever their opinion may be.
Mr. Delarianda had asked you whether or not you had visited any sites specific to this case. I think you said no.
I didn't know if there were sites specific to this case.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to prompt him with a whole bunch of different names, but there are some websites out there. There are some petitions that have been signed on one side or the other.
Right.
Have you visited any of those sites and signed any petitions?
No, I didn't know that.
Have you ever acknowledged your support for one side or the other, like in a rally or a support meeting or anything like
No.
that? You mentioned that Sanford's your backyard. Any concern that you have handling a case that you now know is of this significance and deciding it, and then going back to your backyard and dealing with whatever might happen based upon the result of the case?
Yes, yeah. Last night, after I came home and I realized what jury duty I was here to serve, what case it was. I was concerned. What if I'm chosen and we make a decision, and a friend of mine, maybe even a family member, is very strongly opposed to the verdict that we rendered.
Right.
Like would I alienate that person?
Sure.
How would I handle that?
So how to handle it?
I don't know. I would certainly say, well, this was the evidence. These are the facts. This is what we saw in court. Tell them what I can tell them. But I understand a lot of people, once they make up their mind's made up. Or they have a certain ideology that everything they hear, they classify into the spectrum of that ideology. Never leaves.
You had said a little while ago that tragedies like this seem to happen more often, and this one has gained some particular significance.
Yeah. Well, national significance.
Sure.
I think, since it's, around the area I live, that it's significant for me, but national media, world media.
Well, tell me how you think that exposure or pressure is going to affect you if you're asked to sit on the jury and make that decision.
As long as my anonymity is preserved.
Okay.
I certainly would be concerned if who I was, my identity was to become public.
So let me ask it a different way.
Okay.
Let's just say that I was calling you John Doe right now, your real name, instead of what we're trying to do to protect some anonymity. Let's just say that we didn't do that.
Right.
Now, what's your concern?
Is the trial, is the media in the trial? Are they?
Yes.
Yeah, that would concern me.
Tell me how.
Well, the same way when I mentioned how it might alienate friends and family, but I would be afraid that it might anger strangers. Someone might retaliate.
Mm-hmm. What are you going to do if we do select you and under my premise that your name cannot be held anonymous. How do you handle that?
What choice would I have?
Here's my concern, and I want to see if you could address it. I'm wondering whether or not that pressure that we're now talking about is going to cause you either to have a difficult time making a decision or making a decision based upon those external pressures rather than the facts of the law.
Oh no, it wouldn't affect my decision making. It's not like something I'm scared of. I was just more of some concern,
So now, since we're talking about this subject, you look at the facts, you look at the law, and you say, you know what? There's no self-defense here. George Zimmerman is guilty.
Right.
You're okay going home to your backyard and dealing with that.
Yeah.
And if you look at the facts of the case and you say, this is self-defense, whatever other reasons you decide that George Zimmerman is not guilty, knowing that that may polarize people, you're going to be okay to do that, ignoring those pressures that we've now spent a few minutes talking about.
Yeah, well, at that point, the decision would have been made, right? It wouldn't.
Well, you're making it. In my scenario, you're making a decision as to whether or not. Can you do that?
No, I'm talking about the decision in the trial setting,
Mm-hmm.
how I feel about what, how I personally feel after the trial, I wouldn't know until that moment were to come.
Okay.
I don't think I could speculate on that.
Great. Can you commit, though, that you're not going to let those external pressures affect your job as a juror?
Yes.
I'm just going to end with a question or two about your dad again, if I might. Obviously, you respect your dad and his opinion. Anybody else that you've talked to this about whose opinion you respect that has an opinion regarding Mr. Zimmerman's actions? I'm going to just have a moment. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. When counsel's ready, please approach. Good morning, Juror B35. That's your name for now, okay? We're here to ask questions about the survey that you filled out yesterday, and Mr. De La Ronda is going to start.
Please support. Good morning. My name is Bernie Del Riota, and as Judge Nelson indicated to you, we're going to be calling you B35, but that's all right. I've had an opportunity to read over your questionnaire, and I had some questions as a result of that. What we're trying to find out at this time, it's very limited just to publicity in terms of what you've heard about the case or read about the case. So I'm going to delve into that if we could. You said you heard about this case from various media sources. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. And you also said also from friends and relatives.
Yes.
And then also local news and I guess Fox News too?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Is the Fox News that you're referring to the national Fox News, like, you know?
Yes.
Like, you know, okay. And then you also said the radio?
Yes.
Okay. So let me take those.
Yes.
Okay. And any particular programs or just news? You know, they have.
I watch like the morning news they would have, and I watch Sean Hannity at night.
Okay. All right. No Bill O'Reilly at all? Or?
I watch some of that too.
Okay. Then you also mentioned friends, just like neighbors or people at work or just
Right, just
friends?
conversational stuff with friends and people at work.
Okay. And then family, immediate family or just?
Immediate and extended family.
All right. And I gather from all these various sources that you obtained information, you have not formed an opinion one way or the other. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. Tell me, if you could, from the local news, as best you can, what you recall hearing about the case.
Basically, we're trying to say that that I guess Mr. Zimmerman killed Trayvon Martin, sort of a racial thing, and that he was out of bounds by following him and tracked him down and things like that.
Okay.
To make it racial.
Right. And I apologize for not asking it this way, but that would have been at the very front end when you first heard about
Right.
the case? Is that correct?
Yes.
And how did you feel about the news being portrayed it that way? What I'm trying to ask is distinguishing between, you know, just fact news or opinions that sometimes is interjected right after the news. Do you understand what I'm trying to get at?
Yes, about the telling from kids as far as being racial.
Yes.
I didn't see it that way because I didn't know. I don't know, but I can read the man's mind and tell whether he decided he wanted to kill the guy because he's black or what. I just figured that maybe they met at a wrong point in time and things went wrong and they disagreed and something happened and I don't know what happened because I wasn't there, but I don't think it was racially motivated.
Okay. All right. Anything else about the first impressions from the local news that you obtained that we would be asking you about? Anything else you remember specifically about facts of the case?
No.
Okay. Then you mentioned national news. Let's talk about it. And is your information about this case in terms of nationally just limited to Fox News?
Pretty much.
Okay.
And I watch a little CNN too.
Okay. So let's talk about Fox News. You mentioned, would that have been from the morning or from Sean Hannity or both?
A little both.
Okay. The morning, what do you recall in the morning? And I gather you watched I can't remember her name. There's a woman and then there's two guys in the morning.
Yeah, I forget her name, the blonde hair lady.
Right. Okay. What do you recall hearing about the case?
Mommy is here.
Thing is trying to say that maybe the gentleman needs to have a fair shake before he wants to start making all his opinions and start assuming that a person was guilty because they think of that maybe it might have happened this way or that way when they weren't there.
Okay. And how did you feel about that?
Almost the same. Pretty much almost the same. I figured the man needed to have his day in court and see what happens and let the chips fall where they may. If he did viciously do what they say he did, that he deserves to be punished for it. If not, then we got to let him go.
Okay. And in other words, you believe in the concept of Fox News fair and balanced, in other words?
Well, I just believe in a man is innocent until proven guilty.
Okay.
Where
You
Fox
believe
News
in
says-
the Constitution in terms of presumption
Absolutely.
of innocence?
That's right.
Okay. Because you haven't heard any of the facts?
Right. I wasn't there and I didn't see the tussle go down.
Okay. All right. Now, you mentioned Sean Hannity. What do you recall? Because Sean Hannity, while he covers news, is more opinionated. Would you
Yeah,
agree?
it's real opinionated.
Okay.
Yeah, and he's
All
kind
right.
of out there.
He's on one side of it. Would that be a fair statement?
Absolutely.
Okay. Because I watch Sean Hannity too. What do you recall hearing about this case about Sean Hannity?
Well, I saw a lot of the folks there on television, and I think one of the things that sort of stuck in my mind was, I forget the lady's name, but she had this pink hat on with pink suit. She's one of our senators, I think, and
made a statement as if Trevon was hunted down like a rabid dog and shot. I said, that's out of bounds. So we don't know we weren't there. All we know is the tapes and what we heard. We don't know how that happened. So I really didn't like that.
Okay.
But that's the way, that sticks in my mind the most.
Okay. Anything else about Sean Hannity that you recall hearing about this case? I'm not allowed to, doing this proceeding or any proceeding really, to tell you what came out.
Yeah, they're
And
talking
I'm
about
trying to pro from your mind.
Yeah, they were
as
talking
best I
about the
can.
NBC tapes, how they voiced over or took off the part where I guess Mrs. Zimmerman was talking on the phone to the dispatch lady, and she said the part about, I think he's black. They make it seem like it was racial. And they said on the news that was edited out. And that stuck in my mind. And let me see what else. They were saying that a lot of the pictures of the young man that was killed that day were not up to his regular age, I guess. They were showing younger pictures to make it, I don't know, to make it seem as though he was younger than he was. I don't know what it looked like. I've never seen it, but those are pictures that I saw. But I don't really know if that was true or not. But those three things are what stuck out the most on that.
Any other pictures or any other interviews that Mr. Hannity conducted, if he did, that stand out in your mind that you recall about this case?
Those were the main ones, because I was kind of not wanting to be a racial thing, and when I saw the Reverend Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson get up there and march and do all this saber rat, I wasn't with that, because I think we got more important things to worry about than this one case.
Did that alienate you against the Mr. Martin's in terms of him being the person that was killed in this case?
Not at all.
In other words, did that kind of put you in the Zimmerman camp because you felt that those commentators or whatever, or people were doing something in your mind that they shouldn't have been doing? Do you understand
No, what it did actually was kind of made me upset, because I guess they're trying to politicize it and make it into a racial issue when we don't know exactly what went down that day. I didn't like that, and I felt for the family and everything. Because if I was in the family issue, I would probably went the same way. But I wasn't agreeing with the racial connotations, and they're trying to make it to be too flamboyant. I wasn't with all that.
All right. So, in other words, based on your feelings about that was inappropriate.
Absolutely.
You would not hold that against the state of Florida because we're prosecuting Mr. Zimmerman?
No, sir.
Okay. In any way whatsoever?
No, sir. I feel what you guys say is going to be the facts, and if that's where it was, that's where it would be.
Okay. All right. And I'm assuming the opposite would also be true in the sense of keeping an open mind as to Mr. Zimmerman's guilt or innocence.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is there any dispute about that in your mind?
I don't know. I listened to what they say on television. If Mr. Zimmerman, if he said what he said happened, then he has to be innocent. But if it's proven that he didn't, then he has to pay the price.
Right. Tell me, if you could, expand on that a little bit. When you say he said what he said happened, what are you referring to?
As far as what they were saying that he was saying on television about he was the one on the tape being screaming for his life, and that Trevon went for his gun, so he got the gun first and went in, and then he shot Trevon, and about how he followed him, but the dispatch, I guess, told him to leave to go back. He was on his way back, and then Trevon came from behind, I guess, and said, hey, whatever, then he hit him, and the fight went down that way. Those things.
Okay. And do you recall hearing about that in terms of Mr. Zimmerman when you were talking about what he said? Do you recall that being from recordings that were played about what he said, or was that just commentating?
Commentating, people talking about
Do you remember what commentator was talking about that?
Bill, Sean.
Okay, Bill O'Reilly and
Yeah.
Sean Hannity. I know you're talking about it, just for the purpose of the record. Okay. Sometimes those first impressions are lasting impressions that you form an opinion at that time, other than you felt there was some inappropriate stuff done by Mr. Sharpton and Mr. Jackson. Did you form any other opinions about was Hannity being fair or not?
Not all the way. I didn't think so. I think he had his one side, and he was trying to get his opinion across, trying to keep him being whatever he didn't want it to be. But it was mostly entertainment, just trying to get an idea of what was going on with
Right.
the case.
And do you understand my question is, because I've watched Sean Hannity in terms of in this case in particular, he's one side.
Yes.
Do you not agree with that?
I agree.
And did that sway you in any way or bias you against the state side?
No.
As a result of Mr. Hannity's?
No, sir. Because that was basically his opinion.
Okay, so you don't take him as an authority like,
No, sir.
man, I'm going to be on that jury, and Mr. Hannity said so, and
No.
that's the case.
No.
You can agree to set that aside.
That's right.
Okay, under the law, anything that you would have heard or seen on TV or, read about, etc., the law requires you to take that outside the courtroom and only make a decision of actually what happens in the courtroom when all sides are present, the defense, the state, and the court, and obviously the jury. Can you agree to do that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You also mentioned friends that you spoke the case about. Did they have opinions one way or the other?
Yeah, they all had one-sided opinions. I'll be the only one outside getting yelled in both ears for my opinion.
Okay. Were they pro Mr. Zimmerman or pro Mr. Martin's case? Or
They're all pro Mr. Martin.
okay. Did that alienate you against them, or are you still friends with those people?
Well, we're still good. We're still good. But I can get my opinion across to them because they all believe one thing.
Wow.
I try to tell them. Not
Sure.
to do it.
And did you take the opposite opinion when those friends of yours were talking in favor of Mr. Martin's case?
No. I would just say maybe we want to look at the other side before we make a judgment.
Okay. Did they kind of argue with you about
Always,
that?
every time. So I stopped talking about it with them.
Okay, all right. And you mentioned family.
Mm-hmm.
Did your family, in terms of what opinions, if any, did they express regarding the case?
It was basically the same thing.
Were they pro?
All pro Trevon.
Okay, all right. So, in terms of family and friends, were you the only one that felt the opposite, or?
As far as my experience so far, yes.
Okay, and I want to make sure I have a complete understanding and a fair understanding of what you're saying. Are you saying that you felt that Mr. Zimmerman, based on the facts that you heard on TV, was innocent or presumed innocent at that time, or what are your? In other words, they were expressing that Mr. Trayvon Martin was right. I'm assuming, right?
Absolutely.
And did you take the opposite extreme, or were you kind of in the middle?
Kind of in the middle, because I'm not sure if he's guilty or innocent. I don't know. I haven't seen the facts, only watched it on TV and that kind of thing, and hear people talk, but I really don't know. And that was I was trying to tell people, hey, don't presume this man is guilty because you heard someone say he was, or you heard this happened. It's fine. I wait for the facts to come out, and if I'm not on the jury, if I'm not on the jury, I'm going to still feel the same way. When the facts come out, and that's the fact, and that's what it's going to be. They just follow they may.
Did you feel, in other words, it was important to keep an open mind?
Absolutely, especially in a case like this.
Okay. At some point, you found out you were going to be on, at least potentially, you were going to be on the jury. You didn't know if it was going to be this case, I'm assuming, right?
No, I didn't know.
Okay. When you first got that summons, did you talk to any of your friends and say, hey, listen, I might be on that jury?
No, I just talked to my wife. That was it.
Okay. Did she express an opinion about, like, oh, yeah, now this is your opportunity?
No, it was surprising because I haven't been called for jury duty since I was 18 and back in college. And she went 5 or 6 times since we've been married over 27 years.
She has been?
Yeah.
Well, thank God for her service.
Yeah. And I told her the day they had a report, and she goes, well, that's the day they're going to be doing the George Zimmerman thing. I said, they already have that jury already. She goes, no, you're not, because I'm doing it now. So,
Okay. So you had no understanding that you were going to be, until, I guess,
until yesterday.
Okay. You went home last night, and obviously you followed the judge's admonitions about
That's right.
not doing anything. Did anybody try to approach you at all, or your wife in particular, and say,
No.
oh?
Well, she knew. She didn't.
Now, you also mentioned, I guess, in your questionnaire, you talking about rallies. I guess, did I read your writing? And I apologize, I write terrible too.
What was the question? I could probably.
I stated I might have heard that it may have been, racially?
Yes.
Okay, motivated, or perhaps a misunderstanding between the two individuals.
Right.
Did I get that right?
Right.
Okay, so it wasn't rally, it was racial.
Racial, right.
Okay. Anything about, you mentioned Mr. Jackson or Mr. Sharpton. I gather you didn't agree with what they were saying or doing about the case. Is that accurate? Or?
I don't agree in them rallying all the African Americans together over one case when we have 47 blacks being killed in one city on a constant basis all the time. We don't march about that, but we'll march about an individual case that seems to be racial. But we will march when it's our own kids being killed by our own kids. That's why I have the problem with that.
So it did not alienate against the state or against Trayvon Martin? No. Okay. It was more that what they were doing?
Yes, they were rattling and trying to build their own agendas.
Okay. Now, did you do any research on your own? I know you've been exposed to Fox News and local and all that. Did you say, oh, let me find out a little bit about this case on my own? Let me go to different sites, pro Zimmerman and pro Martin, and make a decision.
No, I didn't do that stuff. I was just conversation with people, friends, and watching television. I didn't go that deep into it.
I know we talked about Fox News. Did you think the local news was favoring one side versus the other?
They seem to be a little more on Siobhan. The only news source that was not all pro Siobhan was Fox. All the others I was watching, CNN, MSNBC, they were all more or less on the side of Mr. Martin.
So you just don't go to the what people may refer to as more conservative. You go to all different areas, I guess, in terms of some people may refer to CNN as liberal. I'm not saying that it is or isn't. But so you were getting a varied views, I guess?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Was that on purpose?
Yes.
Okay. And would that have been only to this case, or do you on a regular basis, look at or watch Fox and CNN?
On a regular basis. I'm interested. I'll try to look at both sides and see.
Okay. Do you focus more on Fox News versus CNN?
No, almost the same.
Okay. And on CNN, do you watch any particular program that, when I'm talking about, it's not just news, I'm talking about commentators. Do you see, what is it, AC or Anderson Cooper? Or?
I've seen some of Anderson Cooper and mostly the regular news that's on CNN. And what's that blonde-haired lady's name that has that show? I forget her name. That's on
CNN?
Yes. Short
I'm
one.
more of a Fox, but anyway.
I've watched her a couple of times, but I forget her name.
All right. Do you always believe what you hear on TV or reading the newspaper?
No, sir.
Okay. Do you always believe that the news gets it right?
Not all the time, no.
Okay. And in terms of the news, the local coverage or the national news, do you recall any commentators specifically, forget about the national commentators like Sean Hannity, Bill O'Reilly, or Anderson Cooper. I'm talking about lawyers talking about the case. Do you recall the names of any lawyers?
No, sir.
Okay. Do you recall any of the lawyers in this case talking about the case in terms of the things you saw on TV or read in the paper?
Just some of the guys over there when they would do their regular, I guess, briefings that they did.
Okay. And you talking about Mr. O'Mara or somebody else on this side? Mm-hmm. Did you watch any of those?
Yes, sir. Some of it, yes.
Okay. Did that, first of all, what do you recall being said by Mr. O'Mara or somebody else on this side over here?
I guess they wouldn't really say much. This was a while ago, so I can't recollect exactly.
Was it towards the beginning?
Yes.
Okay. And you don't have any recollection of what they said?
Not much.
Okay. Did you feel that the state also should have been commenting about the case on a daily basis?
Not really. No,
Okay.
no, not really.
All right. Did that sway you in any way in terms of hearing commentary from the defense attorney in the case?
No, sir.
Okay. Did you agree to keep, or while you were listening to it, did you say, well, hold on, there's two sides to every story?
That's right.
Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. Did you watch any of the proceedings themselves in terms of what was going on in court? Since you live in the community, did you, either while it was being streamed live or later on in the evening, get the rundown in terms of what had happened in court?
Not really. Just stuff like, I guess, the bail. The money issue for attorneys and not getting a bail, that kind of stuff.
Okay. Did you form an opinion as a result of hearing that?
No.
Do you have any doubt in your mind as you sit here today whether your perception or consideration of the actual evidence in the testimony or law might be affected by your prior experience in terms of media exposure?
No, sir.
At all? Nothing? Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Background moment. You mentioned, and I apologize, Your Honor, I may have a few moments. You mentioned having seen the defendant, Mr. Zimmerman. Did you see him on TV?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall in what settings you would have seen the defendant, Mr. Zimmerman?
Yeah, when I guess when he got arrested, they showed his head, the back of his head, and going into the jail.
Anything else in terms of him appearing on TV? Did you?
No, I guess it was mostly that in the early years, in the early part.
Okay, did you watch anything after that on, on national news or on local news?
Just more or less people talking about it on television, not really showing a whole bunch of Mr. Zimmerman after that, other than the same pictures of him
Okay,
going
would
to
it
court.
have just been pictures or would it?
Video.
Video?
Going into the jail.
Okay, anything else? This is what I'm trying to probe from you at this time as best you can recall.
That was, let me see. I remember him when they walked him into the jailhouse and they showed the pictures of his head. And they would keep showing the picture of his face when they talk about the case.
Okay.
But that was pretty much it.
Okay. Did you form, or let me ask you this way, what impressions did you get from those video pictures? Did you form any impressions? I know you stated you don't have an opinion about the case. I'm saying, what were your impressions? I mean, everybody, I'm assuming, has impressions. Maybe you didn't have any.
When I saw the scars on the back of his head, I didn't know that. I figured he was getting a pretty good beating.
Okay.
And somebody had to defend himself. It was pretty. I figured it was a pretty rough fight.
Okay.
On both sides, I guess.
Right. Did you see any pictures of Trayvon Martin at all? Do you recall watching?
Just the pictures that they showed. I guess with the hood on, and I guess one when he was a younger boy.
Okay.
That's
all right. What were your impressions in terms of him wearing a hoodie?
no big deal. I wear hoodies too. He must have been cold.
Okay. Anything else that you can recall now about pictures or videos or interviews of anybody in the case that you recall at this time that you would have seen on TV?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. West.
Morning, sir.
Good morning.
My name is Don West, one of the attorneys for Mr. Zimmerman. If you care for water or something like that, let
I
us
don't think
know.
I'm fine.
Okay. We only have the information that was in the questionnaire that you prepared and then what you've said here today. So I wanted to follow up with a couple of things that indicate that you're self-employed.
Yes, sir.
What kind of work do you do?
Well, I own some houses and some vending machines. I pretty much handle those, and that's it,
Kind of a passive income?
pretty much.
So it would not cause you a particular hardship to sit on the jury?
No, sir.
Be able to maintain your businesses and still be able to see this through, whether it's 4 or 6 weeks? What happens?
That's right.
And that would include, should the jury be sequestered?
That's right. Yes, sir.
Do you have children?
I have one son.
How old?
He's 20, going on 21 in September, and he's a student up in Tallahassee.
Does not live at home with you?
No, he doesn't.
You talked about being in discussions with friends and family members regarding this case. Certainly, if people take different sides, it makes for a more lively discussion. Has your wife specifically commented to you about how she feels regarding the case?
She wasn't really sure either in the beginning. She thought he may have done it the way they say it went down as far as him, killing, but she wasn't with the racial connotations either on that.
So at this point, are you and she somewhat aligned
Yes.
in that sense?
Mm-hmm.
When you have the lively discussions with those that aren't, are you talking about siblings or coworkers or?
Some co-workers and sometimes, like last 4th of July, we got together with I have a big barbecue at my house every year. A lot of family members from both sides of the family come and talk about it. I'm always the one in the middle. Always. But it's mostly all just, mostly family, very few co-workers. Because all the time I really have workers is when I have a Jackson office that I do at the beginning of the year, and I'll talk to a few people that work in my office about it, and they talk about that kind of thing, but not a whole lot.
So for those that you socialize with and are related to at events like this, are you and your wife largely standing alone?
Pretty much.
And that all of those around you have pretty much made up their mind, and there's nothing you can do to talk them out of it?
I might be able to count on one hand the people that hadn't made their mind up yet.
Mm-hmm. You had mentioned some things that happened that caught your attention that you thought were too far, public statements, and you mentioned a woman with a pink hat. Are you talking about a congresswoman?
Yes.
Frederica Wilson?
I think that's her name.
The hat's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
So that's the person we're talking about probably. Did you think that her comments were sort of inflammatory?
Yeah, I did. I really did. I didn't think it was necessary to say that the young man was hunting down like a rabid dog, and because no one was there but these two guys, and I don't believe he was being hunted. Maybe watched but not hunted, and just went crazy when they met. But I don't think he was intentionally being hunted down. And there's one more. What was the African American congressman name? I think it was. He goes, Siobhan was guilty of being some letters, MDB, some stuff like that. That's totally inappropriate. It was MDB, walking in the neighborhood while being black. I mean, that kind of stuff to me doesn't even be said. I'm not with that. I didn't like that.
Were you involved in the media watching what was being done and said in between the time of the event and when the decision was made to arrest Mr. Zimmerman?
Yeah, I was watching some of that. I was watching.
During the time of some of the demonstrations and rallies?
Yeah, I had some friends that went out. Matter of fact, some people who had prepared a taxi. They go, I'm going to go out to the rally. I'm going out to the rally. You coming to the rally? I'm not going to the rally. I said, because of the rally in Chicago for 42 kids that got killed by our own people to go to that rally.
Some of your friends, maybe even some of your family, may have attended the rallies?
I don't know if any of them did, but I do know some people that I socialized with as far as preparing their taxi. They would tell me, because we'd start talking, that they went down there to the rally.
Oh, you do tax preparation?
Right.
Okay, so folks that you would come in contact with.
Right. I managed the Jackson Hewitt office at the beginning of the year.
Do you know anyone in your family or extended family or network of friends that signed petitions in support of?
No, sir, not that I know of.
Have you had occasion to listen to comments made in the media by legal representatives of Mr. Martin's family, Trayvon Martin's family?
Yes, their attorney, the guy.
Yes.
That had, yeah, I watched when he was talking about how the right's going to be suing and trying to prosecute Mrs. Zimmerman at the beginning of when it all happened.
Have you also heard members of the Martin family themselves speak?
Yes, I heard the father. I saw the father speak and the mother speak on television before. Now I understand where it comes from because my son, I feel the same way.
Sure. You can sympathize with anyone who's lost a child, I take it.
Right.
Did you feel that there was some attempt by the spokesperson for the Martin family to increase the racial aspect of this case, if there is one?
I didn't really think that he did as much as our so-called civil rights leaders did. I really didn't see as much from him, though.
Do you feel that if you're a juror in this case and one of the members of the Martin family that might testify, Ms. Fulton or Mr. Martin, would you be able to give their testimony full and fair consideration?
Absolutely.
Is there anything that you attribute to them in the news that would in some way alienate you or affect your ability to consider their evidence?
No.
At the same time, would you consider it with the same scrutiny and perhaps even skepticism as jurors are expected to have as you would anybody else?
Yes, sir.
It sounds like you are, in some ways, sort of used to defending yourself, at least in connection with this case, and in that you can take a position and stick with it.
Yes, sir.
And that you're not easily swayed by the opinions of others.
That's right.
Do you feel you could carry that quality into the jury room.
Yes, sir.
And if I understand what I think I'm hearing you say, and that is that you've heard comments, you've heard bits and pieces of what people claim are evidence, you've heard personal opinions about things all over the board.
Right, that's right.
And that, in fact, in your own family, in your own extended community, people almost across the board are saying this is racially motivated, that it was George Zimmerman's fault,
Yes.
and that George Zimmerman is guilty.
Yes, sir.
But you're able to separate yourself from that and make up your own mind?
Yes, sir.
And would that decision be made solely on the evidence you hear in the courtroom?
Yes, sir.
And because of that, that's how you're able to say, even though you have a flood of information available to you, that you still have no opinion.
That's right.
That you haven't given particular weight to any part of this. Some of it might check out, some of it might not, but if you sit on this jury, you will make your decision based just on what you hear in this courtroom as opposed to all of that other
Yes, sir.
stuff.
That's right.
All right. May I have 1 minute? Thank you. Nothing further.
Thank you. And just stay seated for just a moment, sir. When counsel's ready, please approach. We'll be with you later on. If you'll please follow Deputy Jarvis, bring our next juror in. Please be seated. Good morning. You're going to be referred to as Juror B37. And we're going to ask you, or the attorneys are going to ask you some questions about your questionnaire that you filled out yesterday. Mr. De La Wonder, you may proceed.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
My name is Bernie De La Riona, and as Judge Nelson indicated, we're going to ask you some questions and limited, obviously, to the questionnaire you filled out in terms of list, city, that stuff. My understanding is when you wrote it here on the what your source was or what you had heard, that no real specific issues related to the case?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then you've got, for example, names, place of crime, and names of people involved. I want to make sure I understand what you wrote here. When you say no real specific issues related to the case, you don't remember only the names?
Just a broad spectrum of names.
Okay. And then the place of the crime, the names of the people, that's all you really recall?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Your contact with the media exposure in this case, would it have been at the time when this happened back in February of 2012, or would it have been recently? Or
No, it was back when it first happened.
Okay. And do you recall your exposure to it? Was it local or national news?
Local news.
Do you recall whether it was the newspaper, radio, or TV?
It was TV.
Okay, and what particular station do you recall?
Probably NBC.
Okay. And how about, did you ever hear about it on national news at all?
National, as in like Today Show?
Yeah, or Fox News,
Yeah,
or
it's
whatever.
probably Today Show is pretty much my source in the morning.
Okay, so
when
you
I'm,
stick to NBC locally and nationally.
pretty much, and it's the only time I kind of listen to it is in the morning when I'm fixing I have a lot of animals and I do all their food in the morning. So
Okay.
that's pretty much it. And newspapers are used in the parrot's cage.
I'm sorry.
Newspapers are used in the parrot's cage, not even read.
Do you read them before you
No,
do
I
it?
don't.
Okay. I'm not going to comment
It's a
about that.
lot better use in the parrot cage.
Okay, all right. So you have no use really for the newspapers?
I don't.
Okay, and why is that?
I just don't think they're truthful. I think there's a lean left or a lean right, politically.
Sure. And in terms of the newspapers, at least the local newspapers here, do you believe they lean one way or the other in terms of lean left?
I don't know. It's
You
been
don't-
so long since I ever even read one. The only time I see them is when I'm putting them down on the floor.
Okay. How about from NBC standpoint in terms of the news? What do you recall other than the names? Anything right now? Now you've had some time to think about it. And what I mean by that is from Monday when you filled this out yesterday morning. Anything else kind of pop in your mind that you remember about the case?
Well,
Other
I
than-
remember the names.
Okay.
And I remember the issues in Sanford when they were having riots.
Okay.
Rioting.
Tell me what you remember about that.
That's pretty much it. Just that there was a whole lot of indiscretion and angry people and picketing people.
Sure.
And a lot of news media.
Okay. Now, we have the First Amendment, we have the Second Amendment, we got all kinds of amendments. How did you feel about, in terms of people having rallies around it? Did you form an impression based on that? Did you feel that was proper or not proper? What kind of things went through your mind?
But not really proper or improper. I mean, they can do what they can do as long as it's peaceful.
And did you think it was inappropriate what they did?
I think maybe it was overdone.
Okay, all right. As a result of that, did that impact you one way or the other to favor Mr. Zimmerman's side or the state side in terms of on behalf of Trayvon Martin?
Not really, because I think it's just an unfortunate incident that happened.
Okay. And I gather based on your questionnaire, you have not formed an opinion in this case,
I have
correct?
not.
Okay. In terms of your exposure to the publicity or media aspect of it, on the radio, did you listen to it on the radio at all? Or
No, I don't listen to the radio,
Okay.
really.
How about on your internet surfing? Are you not
I
one of
don't do
those?
that either. I'm pretty
Okay.
much on the Candy Crush saga right now,
Okay.
trying to get to the next level.
Gotcha. All right. So you didn't do any, like Facebooking or anything like that in terms of particular to this case? right?
No, not at all.
Okay.
None.
How about, and you didn't do any research on your own?
No.
Okay, since you live in this community, at least in Seminole County, you didn't do any
I have no
research?
time to do anything other than
Okay.
feed my animals and sleep.
And how
Sometimes
about,
the sleep is rare.
okay, how about with friends? Did you have any discussions with friends, in the community about what was going on, about the case?
Not really, just that it was there.
Okay.
I mean, politics and news, and I just kind of
Stay
don't
stay
indulge
away
in
from
it.
it.
Yeah.
How about family? Did you have any discussions with any family members where they gave you opinions or they talked about the
No.
facts of the case?
Absolutely not.
So you're one of those individuals that just focuses on what you've got going on in your
I
life?
do.
And don't worry about any other external stuff?
Exactly.
Okay.
Because you normally don't get all the information, so how do you form an opinion if
So
you
you
don't
don't
have the
believe,
information?
you don't really trust the media in terms of being able to be accurate?
I do not, and I think it's that, I don't know if there's any way they can control media hype like that.
Sure. Now, the media sometimes, especially now with all the TV stations and stuff, and even some might argue the newspaper aspect of it, sometimes besides giving the news, they also sometimes give opinions, and they have people giving opinions.
Mm-hmm.
Have you paid attention to any of that stuff?
I have not.
Okay. How do you feel about that, people giving opinions about facts of the case or anything like that?
It's media. I'm not a big fan. I mean,
Okay.
it's First
Now,
Amendment, but
and I know your exposure to this case in terms of the media aspect has been limited. Assuming you were to get on a jury and you're sitting in a jury and you're listening to the evidence and you hear, ABC, in terms of, one witness says ABC, and you go, hold on, now that I think about it, and I do remember, I wouldn't say the newspaper because that's left for something else, but I do remember on NBC, something about this. My question is, in our mind, we have in our memories, we have stuff stored there, even if it's limited in terms of our exposure to this case. Do you understand under the law that you have to only rely on what happens in this courtroom, not what you might remember as you're sitting as a juror about what you had heard on NBC?
Yes, sir.
Can you do that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you can concentrate on the facts that actually come out in this courtroom and the law that Judge Nelson will give to you
Yes, sir.
in making your decision?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You got the jury summons. Obviously, the jury summons didn't say Zimmerman case, but it did say you were going to be a juror, right?
Exactly.
Upon receiving that, did you go, oh, maybe I will be on a particular case? Did you do any research about not just the Zimmerman case, but other cases that were going on to see potentially what you might be a juror for?
Not really, because I've been called 3 times, and pretty much I just come and sit.
Have you actually served as a juror 3 times?
I got called back for a jury, but then I was disqualified because I worked for a chiropractor, and it was a hit-and-run type thing.
Okay, all right, so. Have you kept up with any of the, even on NBC, have you kept up with any of the proceedings that are happening in the courtroom?
No.
None at all? Okay.
Since I've been called for jury?
No, I'm talking about at the beginning, when it happened back in February, and we're now in June, a year later, or more than a year later, I should say. Have you kept up with any of the proceedings that happened between February and June of this year?
No, sir.
Okay, you haven't watched any, because I'm just saying it would have been in the local news,
Right.
on NBC. You would not have
No,
watched
sir.
any of that? Okay, you don't remember anything of happening at all like that?
No. I didn't even know what he was even charged with until I got here.
Is there any doubt in your mind about whether your perception or what you recall, and I know it's limited in terms of exposure in this case, whether that would factor in at all or interfere with you being able to sit as a juror and keep it an open mind?
No, sir.
Okay, so as we sit here today, as you sit here today, I'm standing, you feel you can be fair in terms of the publicity that has not impacted you one way or the other, either in favor of Mr. Zimmerman or in favor of the state, Florida, on behalf of Trayvon Martin?
Yes, sir.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
I have a moment, Your Honor. I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. O'Mara?
Morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
How are you? As a sort of a parent, this is very limited. First time we'll talk to you is just going to be about what we call pretrial publicity, what you brought to the courtroom about the facts of the case or your thoughts about it. So we're going to be limited to just that. And it sounds as though you have a strong opinion about the media, which is to regard them with skepticism.
Skepticism, politics, skepticism, because you never get all the information. There's no possible any way that you can get all the information without it being leaned, skewed one way or the other.
How do you handle that when you do seek to get news?
I really don't.
Okay.
I let my husband deal with that.
All
That's
right.
his deal.
Okay. Are there any sources that you look towards to get information about a subject that you want to find out about?
Probably Safari,
Just
Google.
a Google search.
and normally it's about animals of
Okay.
some sort or another.
Sounds like you have a number of
I
them.
have too many.
Too many. At least one parrot.
One parrot, one crow with one wing. He's like 15. I volunteered for rescue groups, bird, cat, and you wind up with animals.
Okay. How many altogether?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I have 3 dogs,
All right.
4 cats, and a couple lizards. I just rescued a lizard like a month ago.
Okay. Your service on this jury could run several weeks were you to be selected.
Yes, sir.
You got that, I think, from the questionnaire.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a chance that you would be sequestered, meaning that you will not be spending time at the house, but rather with the rest of the jury.
Mm-hmm.
how would that affect your household duties with the animals and everything else that you do at your house?
My husband already said that he would do it all. But I do have 2 daughters that would be backup.
Okay. So that part of it would be covered if you had to spend several weeks with us.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anything else that we haven't talked about or that you didn't mention on the question talking about hardship? Anything else that you have going on that would affect your ability to deal with this case where you're asked to do it for several weeks?
Well, the hardship would be my boss's hardship for me not being there. But I'm not sure that's a hardship.
Okay.
I mean, it's dealable.
If you weren't there, he's got to deal with the fact that you're not there.
Right.
You would certainly have a job to go back to.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
But he wouldn't like it.
And, okay. Are your family finances such that it would not cause a hardship that you couldn't get past were you to spend those several weeks with us?
No, because I'd be paid.
You'd be paid through your work?
Mm-hmm.
You had mentioned that your knowledge of the case was just sort of early on, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And more of a broad spectrum of names.
Mm-hmm.
If I asked you to tell me the most significant issue or fact about this case that you remember, what would it be?
Just that there was a death.
Do you remember who it was who passed away?
It was Trayvon Martin.
Okay. Describe him.
He was a boy of color, and I believe teenage years, older teenage, I believe. I don't even know how old he was.
Okay. And obviously shot by Mr. Zimmerman.
Yes, sir.
What do you remember hearing about Mr. Zimmerman back there in the beginning of it?
I just heard that he was involved in a scuffle. It was late at night, and the boy was killed.
Anything about those few facts that you had heard about that, tell me what you thought about that.
I thought it was very unfortunate that somebody died, but that's why you have a jury, and that's why you have a trial to prove innocent or guilt. It's just very sad.
And then you mentioned some concerns about the way it was responded to in the community. Is that correct?
Well, in the media.
Did you have concerns about the picketing or what was sort of happening as a response to Trayvon Martin's passing?
Not really concerns, because I'm not involved in any of it. And Sanford is kind of away from Oviedo, Winter Springs. I mean, I knew there was rioting, but I guess they had it pretty well organized.
You don't spend much time, you mentioned safari, but you don't spend much time what people now call surfing the internet just to see what's out there?
I don't have time.
Okay.
I really don't.
So when you go on the internet, it's for a particular purpose.
I'm looking for a recipe, or I'm looking for something.
Okay.
No need, no news.
Have you ever gone to any of the websites or any websites that are specific to this case?
No, sir.
There are petition websites and things like that. Have you ever signed a petition regarding this case?
No, sir.
Ever looked at any of that information on the internet?
No, sir.
And you said that you have a couple of daughters?
I have 2 daughters,
Okay. Their ages?
24 and 27.
Do they live nearby you?
One lives with us, and one lives just a little ways away, 10 minutes away.
Have you discussed this case, or even generally, with your husband?
I have not.
Not at all?
No.
even when it was early on, when you were talking about some of the reactions to it? Was that ever a point of conversation?
No, sir.
Any other people in the neighborhood or your daughters?
No, sir. There was the other day at work, somebody came in, said that the trial was going to begin, and that pretty much was it. Because I got busy with something else.
You did mention at one point that you thought you heard that your default national program is the Today Show.
Yes, sir.
Did you say that you saw something about this case on the Today Show?
At the very, very beginning when it happened.
And do you recall what it was that you saw?
It was just it wasn't even an interview. It was just a news flash saying that there was a death and there was rioting in Sanford.
Okay. Primary concern that we have when we talk about what you bring is if we don't talk much about it now and something comes up later,
yes, sir.
That which comes up later could affect how you look at the case or how you act as a juror.
Yes, sir.
So it sounds as though you've kept yourself, just the way you live your life, pretty isolated from this event. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
And that you don't have any thoughts in mind or predispositions about what happened that night?
Yes, sir.
Let's say that something came up. Mr. Delaronda, I think, approached this. Something came up where you did remember something. Remember something about the rally or something about a conversation you had with a neighbor that we didn't talk about here today, but now you're sitting on the jury. How would you handle any conflict between that memory and the evidence that you hear in this courtroom?
Well, the evidence that I hear in the courtroom, I would presume to be true. If I had a conversation with someone else that I remembered, the facts are maybe not the facts.
If, let's say that another jury did the same thing while you were deliberating with that jury. You know how the process works? Take evidence, you listen to the judge, you find out what the law is, and then you'll go back and the jury will decide what happens.
Yes, sir.
No, I'm sorry, decide their verdict.
Right.
In that context, what if another juror talks to you and says, well, I heard about something else that I didn't hear in the courtroom. I remember I saw this on TV or read it on the radio, read it on the newspaper or heard it on the radio, and I think this happened, even though it never came from a witness here. How would you react to that?
I would say it was media hype. I mean, you can't prove anything that you heard prior to this case.
One of the instructions that you're going to be told by the judge is that you have to decide only on the facts that you hear, competent evidence in this courtroom.
Yes, sir.
And that while we won't ask you to leave your common sense at the door, we actually want you to use your common sense. We can't let you bring outside evidence or knowledge or information inside. So would you be able to advise another juror it doesn't come from a witness stand, it doesn't get considered?
Yes, sir.
Though you have not talked much with your other family members, have either daughters or your husband just sort of downloaded on you their thoughts about the case?
No, sir.
No conversations at all?
None.
The judge is going to instruct you for you to be on the jury. Not only is there a chance that you might be sequestered, but either way, that you cannot discuss this case with anybody during the time of your service.
Yes, sir.
Going to be able to do that?
Yes, sir.
Even if your husband says, I think this about that.
No, my husband would be totally opposite. He would, no, I can't talk to you.
So he's not going to be the problem then.
Yeah, he even told me last night, he said, do not watch the news. You're not allowed to watch the news.
Okay.
I'm like, okay. So now he told me this morning that he'll tape the Today Show. I can watch it when I get home. But he'll have already edited it.
Great. So he's going to be an
I think it's
advocate.
a little over and beyond, but I'm thinking
Sounds
I just
like-
won't watch the Today Show.
Sounds like he's willing to be an advocate on the court's behalf to make sure that you don't see anything you're not supposed to see.
Yes, sir.
Okay. If other people that you've spoken to about this case, friends or family, do you know whether or not they've made or have any opinion about the case?
I really haven't talked to anybody about the case.
And if I asked you for just a raw number of times that you've heard since what was the first thing you heard about this case?
On the Today Show.
Okay, that was it.
Uh-huh.
From that point all the way forward through today, if I asked you just total of how many times you've talked to anybody about it, added to the number of times that you've seen anything about it in the media, I include reading, internet, TV, radio.
The only thing I would have heard about the media, with the media, are blurbs about, popping in and popping out.
Okay.
And normally I'm half listening to that anyway.
So a gross number of inputs that came to you from people or media. How many do you think?
I have no idea.
Okay. Nothing, however, to really have any impact or influence on you?
No, sir.
Great, thanks for the time. Nothing
You're
further.
welcome.
Stay seated, please. When council's ready, please come forward. Please take Juror 37 to the fourth floor, and we're going to take a 10-minute recess. We'll be with you again shortly. Thank you. It's 11 o'clock. We'll be taking a 10-minute recess. Court will be in recess. Please be seated. If we could call in our next potential juror, please.
Your Honor, this is B51.
And please be seated. Good morning. And we're going to be referring to you as Juror B51. And the attorneys are going to ask you questions about your juror questionnaire that you filled out yesterday, okay? Mr. De La Ronda, you may proceed.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
My name is Bernie De La Ronda. As Judge Nelson indicated, we're going to be asking you questions regarding just what you filled out in terms of publicity, that kind of stuff.
Oh, yes.
Okay?
Sir. Yes, sir.
All right. As I understand, based on the questionnaire you filled out, that you had some information that you gleaned from the media, is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. And would that have been from local and national, or just local, or?
Just local.
Okay. Was it on TV or the newspaper?
Newspaper, I do get the paper, probably one of the few, but I do get the paper. And I also then see the evening news primarily, nothing in the daytime.
Okay. The paper, would that have been the Orlando Sentinel?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then the evening news, what local station do you favor?
Channel 9, I don't know
Okay.
what.
That's fine, that's good enough.
Okay.
Okay. And what do you recall? You already put something here in terms of what I've got here is that you heard that George Zimmerman was part of Neighborhood Watch and had a gun permit?
Yes, sir.
Is that what you remember?
That's what I recall.
Okay. And then he shot Trayvon Martin after an altercation and killed a young man?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Would you put down, would that have been based on what you remember at the time in terms of close to when it happened or more recently?
I think that's just been my summary of it throughout
Okay.
the duration of this.
Yes, ma'am. So what I want to try to do as best you can
Yes,
is let's focus when you first heard about it back in February of 2012. Would that have been both from the newspaper and in the local TV station?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
And what are the first things that you remember about the case, if you can remember, back to February of 2012? What do you remember, your first impressions about the case, what you heard?
That it was sad.
It was sad?
Mhm.
And after that, did you continue to pay attention to it as something came up throughout the proceedings?
It's just kind of hard not to.
Okay, and
I
it happened
did,
here in Seminole County?
Yes, sir.
And so
And I had friends up from out of the area. My family's not here, and they wondered, well, where is Sanford? They didn't even know where Sanford was before all this came about.
So would it be fair to say that every time it came out in the newspaper, you would read it about it?
Yes, for the
Okay.
most part. Yeah,
Sure.
I may skim it. I may not read the whole
Right.
thing.
And then every time it came out in the local news on Channel 9 especially, you would watch it
If
when
it was
came
there,
out?
yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
During the 6 o'clock hour.
Sure,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
And did you ever pay attention in terms of national news, or do you watch any national news, like Fox, CNN, or the, NBC, CBS, ABC?
Again, Channel 9, Diane Sawyer.
Okay.
And if she had anything, it would be on. It
So
would-
she's ABC, I believe.
Is that right?
Okay, all right. I think, I'm not positive
It may
about
be.
that. Okay, but did, whatever they had on regarding the case, you would watch?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Just the news in general, yeah.
Now, the news sometimes, even the newspaper and TV, sometimes have the news, the old-fashioned, I can tell by age, Walter Cronkite would tell you the news.
Yes, sir.
Right? But then now you also have commentators that you didn't have before. My point is, have you watched any of that stuff, like lawyers or other people talking about the case?
No, just
Okay.
the news.
So it was just strictly the news, at least? Okay.
Right, yeah, I'm not aware of the other.
Okay. What impressions, if any, did you have regarding the media in terms of how they were treating the case? Did you think they were slanted one way or the other, or did you think it was a fair coverage? That's what I'm trying to get from.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. I'm not certain what their motivation is. My assumption is that they're covering what happened.
Okay,
On
so
it.
you felt they were just covering strictly the news?
Right, yes.
Okay. And I gather from what you saw on TV and read in the paper, you didn't form opinions one way or the other, either in favor of the state on behalf of
Oh.
Trayvon Martin
Yes.
or the defendant, George Zimmerman. You didn't form opinions one way or the other.
No,
Okay.
I never went that far with it, just
Okay.
honestly.
Now, I'm sorry, and you mentioned also that you discussed it with friends out of town that would tell you what's going on in Sanford.
Yeah, they just wanted to know, they hear what on the news they're getting. My family, as I said, mostly live in Jacksonville.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay. What do you recall, if any, that they told you about the case that you had not heard yourself or seen in the news here? Did they give you any more insight?
No.
Well, in Jacksonville, they're saying this or that.
No,
Okay.
they didn't get involved in it.
Sure.
They're not that interested in it, I'm afraid.
Okay. And did any of that family that you discussed this with, did they give you their opinions about the case? I know you say you don't have opinions,
No.
but did they say, wow, this shouldn't have happened, or this should have happened, or whatever it
No,
was?
sir, they're
Okay.
just maybe that, I hate to say not that interested, just, it wasn't, we've got a very big family and we've got more dysfunction than,
Okay.
we're more talking
Sure.
about that than
Okay.
anything.
How about, did you ever have discussions with friends about the case?
No, sir.
Okay.
No.
Did you ever do any research on your own in terms of on the internet? You don't mess with the internet?
I
or-
do.
Okay.
But I don't mess with it.
You
in
didn't
that
mess with
regard.
this case?
No, sir, I didn't.
In other words, like on Facebook or Google or anything like that, or Twitter?
No, I didn't do it.
You don't do Twitter?
No, I don't, sir.
Okay.
But no, for the last several months, I've been handling my uncle passed away.
I'm so
I'm
sorry
an
to hear
executor, so I was maintaining all of that. So for the last 6 or 8 months, I've been involved in that.
Okay. Now, this happened back in February of 2012,
Correct.
and then let's strike the, let's say from January now, the last 6 months, between February and December, let's say, February and
Yes.
prior to your relative's death. Did you keep up with all the proceedings that were occurring in the court?
I truly didn't. I
Okay.
did not.
So you didn't follow it because you live here in Seminole County, you said, oh, let me find out what's going on in court.
No, sir.
Okay.
No.
You in your questionnaire, you had on the second page, you had scratched off in terms of potential conflict. You originally, it looked like you had kind of strike and then you put no.
What was the question? I don't recall.
It was regarding it expected this trial will last a certain period of time potentially, and
would that be a conflict?
right, would that be a hardship?
Not in the sense that I have children and responsibility. I just have a dog and a 20-year-old cat, and
Okay.
I'd have to manage it.
Yes, but so it's, in your opinion, it's not a hardship?
Not like for some perhaps.
Okay. So you understand your civic responsibilities?
Yes, I
Okay.
had to back off that.
So that would not present a problem, is what I'm getting at.
No, sir.
Okay. And then you also did on the last question that was asked in terms of whether there was any other matter that you wanted to bring to the court's attention, you notated that you're concerned about all the press, TV coverage, cameras outside the courthouse.
It was pretty daunting.
So I gather by that statement, you're saying when you came in Monday morning,
Oh, yeah.
everything out there.
I was shocked.
And I think you referred to it as intimidating. I think
It is.
the
I mean-
word. Okay. You understand that, obviously, as Judge Nelson, I believe, already told you yesterday morning, is that we're calling you by B-51,
Feel like a
and then
bomber.
your picture is not being shown. In other words, there is cameras, there's media here, but by law, they are not showing your picture or anything. Do you understand that?
I do.
And also, when you were coming in, they were not allowed to record you at all. Okay.
No, sir.
Okay. Do you have any concern about that, other than it was a bunch of stuff out there? There was a bunch of media.
It was surprisingly
Okay.
amount, yes.
Okay. My question, and I guess what I'm trying to ask you, maybe inartfully, is you notated that as a point at number 6 in terms of anything not covered in the questionnaire that you wanted to alert the court and both sides to.
That's all.
Is that just an observation on your part that there was a lot of media out there?
Yes, and perhaps in a lot of policemen. I mean, this is unusual, circumstances true, but I was surprised about it all, and I thought it was rather well done, handled-wise. I wasn't fearful, I just was surprised.
In terms of well handled by the
Police.
sheriff's office
Yeah.
and all the other officials in terms of escorting you through there? And,
Yes, sir, I thought it was great in that regard.
yes, ma'am. My question is of you is, would that in any way impact you being able to sit in a jury? I'm gathered from your answers it would not.
No, no, sir.
Okay. I don't have a moment, Your Honor. You mentioned family in Jacksonville. Do you have any other family here,
No.
or is it mainly in Jacksonville?
Yes, sir.
And I think I already asked you, but they didn't express opinions about the case one way or the other,
No,
did
sir,
they?
not really.
Okay. So the bottom line is, just like in any case, you can agree to abide by the judge's instructions and disregard whatever media stuff you've been exposed to. Is that correct?
The past, you mean?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I-
And I know you've abided by the court's instructions yesterday morning not to watch any media, I guess.
Truly, that's correct. I have to do
And
that.
see, my question is as follows, ma'am. You're sitting in as a juror.
Yes, sir.
You're listening to the evidence. Witness number 1 says, A, B, C happened.
Yes, sir.
Not in terms of the TV station, but just decision only on what happens in the courtroom.
I do, yes, sir.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. West.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Don West.
Yes, Yes, sir.
And I'm counsel along with Mr. O'Meara for George Zimmerman.
Yes, sir.
Imagine if it was intimidating outside. It hasn't gotten any better yet. Would you care for some water?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Okay. Just kind of take a deep breath.
Yes.
There's no right or wrong answers.
That's
We're
true.
just trying to really know what you think and what you know. That's part of this information gathering
Yes.
process. So let's start with some really easy ones.
All right.
How long have you lived here in Central Florida?
Since 1987.
And where did you move from?
Objection, Your Honor, this is beyond what we're here for at this time.
Yes, I'd like to keep it to the questionnaire questions at this time. We'll have an opportunity later to ask those type of biographical questions.
All right. Have you lived continuously in Seminole County since 1987?
No, sir.
Well, we'll talk about that more another day.
Okay.
And you are retired from your occupation?
I am.
How long have you been retired?
The first time? I've been retired a couple times.
Well, you know what caught my attention was you said that you don't watch the news during the day.
No, sir, I don't.
So I was wondering, maybe you just recently retired.
I retired somewhat permanently 5 years ago, but I retired the first time in 1991.
Okay.
Okay. I had a couple of careers since then.
I think that's probably something that we might explore later on as well.
Okay.
Except to the extent that that might affect how you gain access to the news or how you get information in general.
Currently,
Well, over the last year.
as I said, newspaper, TV, that's pretty much it. I don't do a lot of TV watching during the day. I stay pretty busy doing different things.
And it's not that you were at work and perhaps
no.
talking with coworkers.
No, I'm not, I don't work.
I know you also mentioned that you've been dealing with the executive responsibilities.
I have.
And has that been over the last 6 or 8 months?
It's been, yes, it's been since December of last year through, and I finalized everything the last week of April, so it's all completed.
Okay. Was it still your routine to read the local newspaper, the Orlando Sentinel, even during that period?
Yes, sir.
And was it part of your routine to read it most every day?
Yes, sir, I get it every day.
Mm-hmm. So to the extent there were articles in the paper about this case, it's likely that you saw them?
If it was in there, perhaps I did, I skimmed it, or perhaps I didn't read it, I went on to something else, whatever the headlines might have been at the time.
Mhm.
No, I didn't.
There wasn't anything about this case over the last year that caught and kept your attention, so you focused on it?
No, sir, just no more than the rest of the news, just read it as it, whatever news was presented, I just read it just to keep informed of what was going on.
Are you aware of some of the issues in the case, decisions perhaps that Judge Nelson has made along the way that have been reported in the paper?
I'm not familiar with I don't know what you mean by issues.
That's well taken, because let me say it in a way I think that makes much more sense for
Okay.
someone reading the newspaper.
Okay.
As lawyers, we're thinking about evidentiary issues or issues regarding witnesses and such. I'm thinking of whether you followed the case to know, well, the lawyers are asking the judge to think about this, and then the judge decided to do this.
If I read it, I didn't retain it, so I'm sorry, I didn't follow it enough to pay attention to it and keep it in my head, if that's what you're asking. Is that what you're asking? If
Yes,
I remember
I guess
anything?
that's
Yeah.
a good point. What is it that sort of stands out to you in the case, other than you saying that your first impression was it was sad?
Yes, sir.
Did you think it was sad from a particular point of view?
Both sides.
Mhm.
Loss of life is always sad,
Sure.
but sad on both sides.
In that you weren't quite sure what to make of it?
Right. I mean, it's just sad, and again, you're hearing all of the media information, and you don't know what happened. You weren't there, and even the people who lived there weren't sure what happened. So I just recall thinking how very sad. That's all I could think of.
Never imagining in a million years you'd be sitting in that chair.
No, sir, no.
Sure.
Not at all.
You mentioned that you knew that Mr. Zimmerman participated in the Neighborhood Watch.
I did.
Did you know that from the media?
Yes.
And how did you feel about that?
Well, I know that subdivisions have them. I live in an old subdivision. We don't, but we know everybody in the neighborhood, so I guess that's our own methodology. So that's all I know. Is I do know some controlled subdivisions have neighborhood watch programs.
Did you think that information itself was positive or negative or just?
I thought it was surprising that there was someone that was so active in it, I mean, active in that they really had somebody going out and being out in the neighborhood, because I always thought a neighborhood watch was just, you just happened to notice things, that was it. I wasn't aware that there were actually people who had a role in physically doing the watching. I thought it was just, if you see something, report it. If you see something concerning in your neighborhood, report it. That's all.
Did you get the impression that Mr. Zimmerman may have done something other than that?
No, just the fact that he was there outside. That's all I could remember thinking, that I didn't know that neighborhood watches were that organized, if you will. I just thought it was whomever perhaps wanted to involve themselves in the neighborhood activities.
As opposed to some sort of organization?
Yes, sir. I'm afraid I just haven't lived in a subdivision that had anything so organized or involvement of the locals that were living there.
Did you get the impression as you saw this case unfold in the media, in the newspaper,
yes,
and such, that George Zimmerman had done something wrong?
That he was where he wasn't supposed to be, you mean?
Yeah.
No. I never got that. I thought it was like he had a night that he was doing this. That it was his part of, as I said, it seemed very organized in terms of that was where he was supposed to be, doing what he was supposed to be doing, part of the Neighborhood Watch program. But I'm not familiar with. Is that what you're asking?
Yes. As I mentioned right at the beginning, we're just trying to get an idea of how this has registered with you.
Certainly.
What stands out in your mind, and that was one aspect of it. Do you think, based upon what you know, that George Zimmerman did anything wrong?
No, not in the sense of what he was involved with. No, sir.
Were there any reports that you read about how the case was supposed to have unfolded that made you think that he had disobeyed a request or that he had done something against the wishes of law enforcement?
I don't understand the question. Say it again, or if you wouldn't mind. What do you mean?
It's sort of like whether he did anything wrong, and that was more specific. There's been a lot of discussion in the media about whether George Zimmerman followed Trayvon Martin.
Actually, Your Honor, in terms of getting into the facts as opposed to what this witness knows.
Give some leeway on that question. You may continue.
Pardon me? I'm sorry, I didn't
I
understand.
said I'll give you some leeway on that question. You may continue.
There's been a lot of discussion in the newspaper
Yes.
as well as other media,
Mhm.
whether or not George Zimmerman followed Trayvon Martin in the
Right.
neighborhood after being told not to.
Yes, sir.
Are you aware of that
I do
generally?
remember that being said.
How did you learn that
And
aspect?
that was in the paper with regard to him being told to not, to wait for the police, I think it was, or perhaps wait for the police, they were on their way. I'm not sure if
So-
if that's what happened, if that's what I recall reading.
So that's really my question,
Uh-huh.
first of all, is knowing that's been some discussion in the press,
Yes.
what is it that you remember along those lines? And then I'll ask you how
Okay.
it may have affected you.
Just that he had called the police, and the police had asked him to wait, and that they were on their way, and that was all. I'm not sure. I guess he didn't wait. I'm not certain. I don't recall the specifics of that. But me thinking he didn't wait is a problem.
Mhm. So, your impression from reading that in the newspaper or from what other sources was
Right.
that Mr. Zimmerman was told to wait and
Right.
he didn't?
Didn't wait, and whatever happened, I don't know what happened. I wasn't there, but certainly he didn't wait, or the police weren't quick enough. I don't know which came first, but he didn't listen to the police officer or whomever was telling him to wait.
And in that sense, do you think that he did something wrong?
Perhaps he did.
How would that affect you in reviewing the evidence in this case, that you've come into the case having heard that in the newspaper and sort of thinking perhaps he did do something wrong?
I guess wrong is an operative word. The result was he didn't wait, and the rest, we know what happened. I'm not sure I'm following you. How do I feel about it? I certainly am aware that was part of the situation, was that he didn't wait.
Do you think then that to some degree you have an opinion that Mr. Zimmerman did something wrong in the case?
I should guess if you want to ask in that way, yes, I guess he did do something wrong.
Okay. So the next part of that would
Yes.
be, if that's sort of your sense of this,
Uh-huh.
and you were to be a juror in the case
Mhm.
and hear evidence that was very different than that,
Okay.
that what you think may have happened from the newspaper didn't in fact happen.
Oh, I'd be happy to not form an opinion based on what I know or think I know. It's more from what I hear or what I would be presented here. I'm not closed-minded, if that's what you're asking. That I haven't made an opinion and I'm rigid about it.
Sure.
Okay.
All right. Yes, that's what I'm getting at. And of course, Mr. Delarionda wants to know the same,
Yes,
as
sir.
we all do,
Sure.
whether or not, if you come into the case knowing something about it,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe even forming an opinion
Sure.
about some aspect of the evidence,
Right.
whether or not that opinion would affect your ability to be fair and impartial as a juror.
I'm a pretty open-minded person. I'm not rigid in my thinking about pretty much anything. I can be made to think differently based on new information, correct information, whatever the case may be. That's just me personally. That's the way I am.
Are you saying that you're not someone who makes up their mind and then sticks with it?
If there's new information, I've been in managerial jobs all my life, and what sometimes is in front of you, if you get additional information, you've got to be big enough to stand up and say, okay, now let me change this. that type of thing.
Yes, thank you. Let's talk about that for just a minute. So
Okay.
are you saying that in your professional life, you've been in situations where you worked with a set of information and then that changed?
Sure.
How were you able to readjust?
Well, depending on the circumstances, I honestly believe that you can't just stand on a platform or an opinion. Even when you get new information, I think you've got to be strong enough to say, I screwed up, I change it, I'm making an amends, or I'm going to change my ruling, or whatever the case may be. And that's just the way I am. Fair is fair. I believe in fairness.
So then if you heard something different in court from what you thought may have happened based upon your exposure to the media,
Yes, sir.
you feel that you personally are capable of reevaluating, readjusting,
I am.
and limiting your decision?
Yes, I am that way. I would be that way.
Is that something that you feel strongly about yourself?
Yes.
Is that something that you've done often at work?
In the past, certainly.
So in that sense, there may be, as an example, what we've talked about, there may be other things too.
Yes, sir.
Is there any aspect of the case that you feel strongly about so that it may be very difficult for you to alter your opinion or integrate new information into your decision?
No, sir.
That Trayvon Martin was a teenager?
No.
That he was unarmed?
No, sir.
Have you heard any of the evidence recordings in the case? Are you aware that there are some recordings that were made that
I am
night?
aware, but I haven't heard them.
You haven't heard any part of any of the recordings?
No, sir.
Have you followed in the newspaper any discussion about recordings that were made and whether or not they would be considered?
Yes, sir.
And what do you know about that?
I just know that I heard on the news that they have not, I don't know if you made a decision, but I just know that differing experts say you can't tell anything by what was stated of information. That was all I heard. So I don't know what came of it, and I didn't hear any recording. I just heard that it's not enough information. You got two sides of experts saying two different things.
How did that impact you? First of all, do you think that evidence is important in the case from what you've read?
I haven't given it any thought, to be honest with you. Honestly, I don't know. I'm sure it is important to somebody, but I haven't gone that far in my brain about that particular piece of information.
Do you know what's supposed to be on the recording that might be important to the case?
Do I know what's on the recording?
Not by having listened to it, by having heard it described or discussed
Sure.
as to what this whole thing is about.
Yes, sir. I've heard that it's a recording of the struggle,
Uh-huh.
and that there is some audible, but that it's not possible to know who, or different people say it's different. Whether it's Mr. Martin or whether it's Mr. Zimmerman, it's hard to know whose voice it is. That's what I've heard. That was just recently, or last week, 2 weeks ago.
Uh-huh. So on that subject, you're aware this evidence exists?
Yes, sir.
And that it's being discussed in court, what the importance of it is,
Yes, sir.
and whether or not it would be considered later?
Yeah, I'm aware that I just don't know where you all are on that.
Mhm. In other words, you're aware that that issue hasn't yet been decided.
That is an issue, yes.
Well, it's going to be decided
Yes, sir.
one way or the other. And we don't know which.
Yes,
And I guess you don't either.
sir.
So, knowing what the issue is and knowing what is being considered, is that something that you would be able to separate yourself from if you were on the jury and the information was allowed to be considered? Would you be able to, I'm saying that so badly, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
What if you, since you know about this information, what if you were on the jury and you weren't allowed to consider the information?
And then
How-
I'd have to put it out of my head. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, clearly I've been around enough to know you only can deal with what you're being presented, so I can't involve myself in something that it's not available to me.
Mhm. So you think, based upon your prior management experience and your ability to deal with sort of discrete
Yes.
sets of
Yeah,
information,
you just gotta put that part away because it's not part of this particular procedure.
that you think you would be able to do that?
I hope so, yeah.
Sure. I mean, you can.
I don't see why very closely and form up an opinion and a decision based on that. So if that helps you in any way.
Of course, you've heard the expression, how do you unring the bell?
Certainly, absolutely.
And that's sort of what we're asking now,
It's
is you've already heard
tough.
things. And when I say you, I mean collectively, the prospective jurors. And whether or not the juror is able to really separate that
Certainly.
and not consider it if it's not actually part of the trial.
Unless you've been living under a rock for the last year, it's going to be pretty hard for people not to have gotten some or a lot of information. But that's a tough job that you have, I'm sure, trying to find the people who can at least open their minds enough to hear what you have to say, those groups.
Well, you've shown remarkable insight into our very problem.
Yeah, it's a problem.
And do you think that you're capable of that?
I'm capable.
Let me talk about a few other things very briefly.
Yes, sir.
Well, unless you hadn't finished.
No, I'm finished.
Okay. That you feel that you can do that?
I do.
Just to clarify, but you haven't actually watched any of the proceedings on television?
No.
You haven't attended any of the
No, sir.
rallies or events
No, sir.
connected with the case?
No, sir.
And you haven't heard any of the attorneys connected with the case, meaning with the defense, with the prosecution, or with the Martin family, the attorney spokespersons? You haven't heard any of them speak on television?
I've heard some of the Martin family attorneys. I don't see them here. I don't know who they are or to whom, and what. But I remember seeing them at a memorial service. But that's all. I don't know who they are.
Do you know what was being said in connection with the?
I think it was just a memorial service or some vigil. I don't remember, I'm sorry, but I do still remember that it wasn't the two gentlemen sitting here, but I don't recall who they were.
Do you remember any of the content
No,
of
no,
the interview?
just that it was a vigil.
And did it affect you in any way, either to increase your knowledge of the case or maybe affect you emotionally?
No, I don't even remember specifically. I just know that they were attorneys, but I don't know in what role they play in the part in this process. As I said, I haven't seen them, so perhaps they're not attorneys at all. I don't know, but it seemed that one of them was an attorney.
Do you remember if you've heard any interviews on television with Mr. Tracy Martin, Trayvon Martin's father, or Ms. Sabrina Fulton, Trayvon?
No, I
Martin's
haven't.
mother?
I have not watched any of those. I know that they've been on, but I haven't watched them.
And do I understand correctly that you never watch the, for lack of a better term, the discussion shows, like Sean Hannity, Bill O'Reilly, Rachel Maddow,
No, sir,
Al
I don't.
Sharpton?
My parents do, but I don't. No, I don't.
So you don't have any preference for any of that kind of social political discussion?
No, I don't have the time or the energy to listen to them.
Sounds like you don't have the interest.
That's,
either. Sure.
yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
Excuse me just one minute. Based upon your review, especially of the Orlando Sentinel, it sounds like, have you heard any opinions expressed or any reporting on how this case was handled by the police department?
Oh, yes, certainly. That was part of the early onset of information that was forthcoming, and the changing in the guard of the chief of police.
How did that, or what did you think about that?
I thought it was embarrassing, but I don't really recall now why everybody was concerned about. I don't know what mishandling the police did. I just remember them saying that perhaps it was that there wasn't a expedient arrest in the process. Honestly, I remember that was more the concern for the community, was not handled that correctly as it should, perhaps.
That Mr. Zimmerman wasn't arrested as soon as some people think he should have been?
Correct. That was the big impetus back then.
You used the word mishandled.
Yes, sir.
Have you concluded that somebody did something wrong in that regard?
Based on, I don't know that it's a conclusion, it's just the end result was somebody felt that it was mishandled, and therefore we have a new chief of police here or something, a new police chief for Sanford. But I'm afraid I don't follow that as well as I should maybe, but I live in Oviedo. So I don't really pay that much attention.
That's not, of course, the police department that's where you are.
Pardon me, sir?
It's not the same police department that
totally
you have.
different.
Well, based upon what you learned in the paper, which, as you pointed out accurately, at some point in time, the police chief was replaced.
Correct. I do remember that.
And that there was some public discussion and a lot of discussion about whether Mr. Zimmerman should have been arrested sooner than he was.
Correct.
What do you think? Should he? Should he have been arrested? Did the Sanford Police Department do anything wrong?
I do. Honestly, I don't know what to think. I mean, again, I wasn't there. You read what you read, and I remember seeing Mr. Zimmerman being taken into the police department on the TV, on the news, and that's pretty much, the back of his head, showing a picture of that. That's all I can recall. I don't remember the specifics, but I just remember that people were upset that he wasn't arrested as quickly as they thought he should be.
And as we all have the right to our opinions, my question for you is whether you think that's true, that based upon what you know, in some way the police mishandled the investigation in this case?
I don't know that I can say that they mishandled it. They were following, I guess everyone has rights, and they were probably recognizing his too, trying to find the facts before they made any decision to arrest Mr. Zimmerman.
Do you think there's anything wrong with doing a thorough investigation
No, I
before
don't.
you make a decision?
No, I don't. And then once I guess they've further investigated, they made the arrest.
Were you aware of any discussion of a new prosecutor being considered or being appointed?
No, sir.
Did you see some of the pictures in the paper of Mr. Zimmerman's injuries?
Yes, sir.
And is that what you were referring
Yes.
to? Did you form any opinion based upon what you've seen in the newspaper or on television who started the fight?
I'm not sure I formed an opinion. I remember reading about it. I'm not sure. Seems to me that I recall that it was Mr. Zimmerman that approached the young man. But I don't, honestly, I know you're living with this every day, but I haven't been, so I really don't retain that much about the particulars. I'm sorry, I don't recall, but I don't have an opinion. I just remember some of the details. They're a little sketchy.
If I'm understanding correctly, although you have lots of information about the case, very little of it has formed a fixed opinion in your mind?
True.
And even with regards to something as basic as who started the fight,
Correct.
that if you were to hear evidence in the case that may have conflicted with what you heard earlier, are you comfortable setting that aside and applying the evidence here?
Yes.
You mentioned that you had talked with some out-of-state family, I think, about the case. Were they far enough out of state that all they got was their local news or the national news on this?
Probably the national news, Atlanta. I have friends in Atlanta.
What did they want to know?
How close do you live to Sanford? That was more the geographical. They couldn't get a sense of where Sanford was. They didn't know where it was.
Did you, could you estimate how many times you may have engaged in a conversation related to this case with your friends and family?
Back when it was fresh, probably half a dozen times.
How about in the last 6, 8, or 10 months?
None. Except in the last month when I got my jury notice, and then of course I thought, I couldn't be that lucky or unlucky, however you want to look at it. That really, I was surprised, but then I didn't know y'all were looking at the jury at that time. So then as it got closer, I knew that was here, and everyone in my family knows. Then I got jury duty. You've sort of mentioned that your conversations with friends and family were early in the case as opposed to recent. Yeah, because it was in the news.
But your discussion, or your review of the newspaper in particular, was pretty continuous through today.
As it appeared in the paper, I would read it, yes.
Have you seen some things in the paper that sounded one way early on that may now be different?
Perhaps, but I don't don't recall what those things particularly were.
When you talked with your family or friends about the case, did anyone express their opinion of Mr. Zimmerman or their opinion about what happened?
No, sir.
Has there been any discussion of the case at any church or civil organization that you belong to?
No, sir.
You mentioned to Mr. Del Riondo in response to one of his questions, your comment regarding sort of this whole process with the media attention and such being somewhat intimidating.
Sure.
if you were selected to be on the jury, do you have any qualms or reservations about you being able to fulfill your oath as a juror and your civic duty?
No, sir.
So the intimidation of the process, in your mind, would it carry into the jury room?
No, sir. I feel that this is a process, and I believe that everybody has Mr. Zimmerman's interest. It's a fair trial, and as jurists, I think we would probably be very well protected. I'm not concerned or fearful. I just, as I said, it was more a surprise to see so much. I didn't go to, I haven't ever, don't sit in courtrooms and be a part of trials as a general spectator. So I was just kind of surprised to see so much interest and so much coverage outside of our community.
Sure. There, today, for example, there's anonymity in the sense that no one is seeing your face on television.
Yes, sir.
And your name is being withheld from the public.
Correct.
There may come a time later where your name could be released to the public.
Okay.
If, knowing that's a possibility, given the circumstances that we're talking about, would that cause you any concern or any reservation to participating in the jury?
I wouldn't think so, but I mean, again, I guess I always wondered why people would do those kinds of things, or call, or are you saying they would call me or follow me, or I wouldn't be threatened. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm not sure I'm following what I would have to be worried about. Would I have to be worried about somebody doing something to me because I was a jurist?
Well, I wouldn't think so,
Okay.
but it's really what you might be concerned
Oh,
about.
no, I wouldn't. I mean, I know jurists in the past in important cases have appeared on shows and talk shows. I would hope that we wouldn't go that particular route. That's not I'm not interested in any limelight. I'm not writing a book. I just want to do what I have to do and go home.
Well, certainly no one, you don't have to talk to anyone ever.
No,
that you don't choose
that's
to.
fine. That's a good thing.
Mhm.
And that's an option, right?
Oh, absolutely,
Okay.
yes. And without question, it's always your choice.
Yeah, well,
Whether someone might
That's not my-
attempt to talk with you is a different matter.
yeah. I'm
And
not
then
one of those.
The idea of perhaps at some point your identity being known,
Judge,
whether,
as to that, Your Honor, I believe the court's already instructed it regarding this.
I'm going to sustain.
I would like to inquire about whether any aspect of that might affect the juror's ability to sit.
And you can do that in the regular voir dire. Right now, we're doing the pre-publicity.
Very well. May I have one moment?
Yes, you
Just
Sure. Sure.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Please remain seated. When counsel is ready, please approach. Okay, I apologize for the lights going out. I'm not familiar with this courtroom, and apparently there's a little switch over here I must have rubbed against. We're going to go ahead and break for lunch. I'm going to have the attorneys come back at 1 o'clock. I'm going to release the potential jurors for lunch till 1:30. I had a group that, Lisa, that's fine whenever they get back. So court will be in recess for the purposes of the lawyers being here till 1 o'clock.